questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand and they will bring you a card to write out what your question is. And the first person to write in is a 35-year resident asking about traffic. It's horrible and all building going to get worse. Thornton was just listed as the worst traffic in the nation. We are next. Anyone want to handle that one?
So there's a lot of different pieces that come with traffic. Some of that's congestion when you talk about that, and so that is a harder nut to crack depending on what part of town you are and what's going on, be it CDOT or our construction. I do know over the last year we've put additional money into streets, so that's a good thing because we're improving streets, but it also does cause congestion. But as far as some of the speeding and kind of those issues with traffic, what I would share is our police department has been on overtime. They've taken the directive from City Council to make sure that people start following the laws. I think we could all agree through COVID, people kind of forgot that there were rules when they drive. So we saw a report recently, I don't remember the exact numbers, but tickets are up because they're doing enforcement, and that will lead to better behavior as far as people driving on our roads. If anybody else wants to share any.
Well, I think that we truly dropped the ball on traffic when we approved the uplands. Right now, traffic is over capacity on Federal Boulevard. The numbers are something like the really capacity of the road is 42,000 car trips a day, and they're running at 45 or 48. The Uplands project right across the street is going to add 25,000 car trips a day. Not all of that goes on to Federal. Some will go on to Lowell and 84th and 88th, but we really made an error there when there were plans to really require more of the developer, like having double left turn lanes on Federal South. As far as I know, the current plans still only have at 84th and Federal one single left turn lane. And I don't see how that's gonna have, well, the capacity. So everyone needs to remind the council, it's not just traffic today, it's the future. And we need to do a better job of that.
I'm glad that Councilor Baker brought a solution with his criticism tonight. But I would say that something was going to get developed there. What is getting developed there is the uplands. And so I would welcome Councilor Baker to give us some ideas besides what the developer could do, what the council could do in order to make traffic better. It certainly isn't just a Westminster problem. The traffic isn't just coming from Westminster. So there's got to be other solutions.
So let me add one more piece of it. We also contributed $1 million, wasn't it $1 million to the Federal study? And there's a study of Federal Boulevard going way in the south, almost to Littleton, and then coming north, okay? And a lot of that Federal Boulevard is 6 lanes, 3 lanes in each of the direction. And CDOT's kicking in money, and Denver's spending $2 million, and we're doing this study. And the focus of the study is to reduce Federal by 1 traffic lane in each direction, which I think is crazy.
The next question was, Legacy Golf Course, 4th tee, can we improve the 4th tee? He has given us a map, and I'm not sure what is circled there, if it's a rock or...
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
All right.
He's going
Hang
to bring
on.
you a mic.
Boy, this brings me back to my education days when I was a superintendent. Anyway, approximately, 3 years ago or 4, there was the idea to redo the 4th tee. I don't know if you folks are aware of that. And huge construction went on for about 2.5 years. In the picture, I would like to bring to your attention some of the problems that this new construction created for our particular part. These are taken from my house. I'm directly opposite the fourth tee. Picture number 1 shows you when they moved the lane for traveling for the golf carts. They brought it much, much closer to our property lines. And the next house, if you were to see the woman there, the next house to the left, it's almost up to their fence. Number 2 shows my concern, the golf carts, and it's interesting that they're so close I can hear them pop the beer cans. I mean, that's, before you could hear the chatter. And we loved fourth because they weren't inebriated yet and they weren't angry yet, so we didn't get the language that some people get. Number 3, they moved all of that dirt out of the, I guess some of the neighbors call it the puddle, and made it into a pond. And so that dirt was piled, and as you can see in number 3, it's just terrible looking weeds. It's not a rough area, it's a weeded area, and probably some farmer would love to come and bale it because it's just atrocious. And that they took away approximately 6 big, beautiful trees that were there. And we talked to some of them, contractors, and they said, this is where we're supposed to put the dirt that comes out of the pond. Number 4 is just a piece of information how no follow-up has happened. That's a...
Excuse me, I'm sitting back here and I don't know what road you're talking about. I don't know where you're talking about. Nobody anything. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. All right. Is this okay with you guys? Sure. What it is, I gave them a paper that has 6 pictures on it from my house to the 4th tee of Legacy Ridge Golf Course. And for those of you who may not know, 3 years ago, they decided to make a huge construction situation out of it to make the puddle that was empty into a pond that they would hold the water. And one of the things that happened is that the follow-up has been, in our opinion, in the neighborhood, pretty poor. And in the pictures, I wish I could had enough for everybody. In the pictures, it shows how much closer the access path, like, is that what you would call it in golf terms, where the golf carts come, is approximately 12 to 20 feet from our fence line, whereas before it was a reasonable distance. And as I mentioned to them, we can even hear them, popping the beer cans or the soda pop or whatever. And at times, I think I hear the shh that comes out. I mean, that's how close they are. The other piece that I have is the picture number 3 shows the mound where all the dirt was piled. And in order to do that, they had to cut down some beautiful pine trees or spruce trees, whatever, and several other trees that they had just planted within the last few years. And you can see it's not a rough area, it's a farmer's delight. Come in there and bale that hay and get it out of there. The other picture with a circle is the beautiful stone that they used to have up on the golf course. It says 4th tee, and it's just down by the fence line being overgrown by weeds. And set 5 is the same way, how close we are to that path. And then 6 shows, and unfortunately, I'm from Minnesota, so ponds and lakes, we have 10,000 of them, but you do something to the edge, and they have not done that. If you saw this, it's not even a good weed growth, and when the pond goes down, you see the plastic that they put so that the water would not seep into the soil. And it is just, Legacy Ridge, I guess, from what I understand, it is a paramount golf course, and at least 4th tee. And some of the comments that we've heard, the golfers say, where's the water? They used to have a nice deal there with a water jug. Where is the this and that and the other thing, and how come it's so this, they're not real pleased with it. So I thought I would bring that to your attention, and I don't know if any of you have ever traveled that path to see what it looked like, but It's not a Minnesota pond, for sure.
Well, thank you for your concern and for the images. I think they're very helpful. I will say that staff will have to give us a complete update, but this is an area where I live, and I know that the last several years we've been doing a irrigation construction project within Legacy Ridge, within the Legacy Ridge Golf Course. And what this is to create a pond, as was mentioned, and we use that reclaimed water to actually water the golf course. So we're not using potable water, which is costly. It is reclaimed water that is either rainfall or used through our system so that it's not treated, it's not extra cost, and that's the holding pond for it. And so this is part of our WaterWise efforts in Westminster, is part of this irrigation of both of our golf courses on Legacy Ridge and Walnut Creek. As far as the update, as far as moving the rock, I agree with you. It probably should be in a better positioned, but we'll have to get an update from staff as far as I don't know if they're completely done, so that would be something that we'll have to follow up with you on.
An argument would be that it isn't just rainwater. There's a section at the end, you see in the picture to the right. I would argue just a little bit with you that if you look at the picture 6 to the right, every day, well, maybe every 2 days, water is pouring in there. So we're not just using rainwater. It goes down to a certain point, and then automatically this pipe blows in large amounts of water, and I'm sure that's from the city. That's not rainwater.
And it could absolutely be from another holding pond. So keep that in mind. I'm not the expert. I will have to lean on my staff for that.
Our city manager is in the crowd. This will go back to Parks and Rec and the people that run the golf course. And sir, we will get back to you. I asked for a phone number so somebody can get back to you. Thank you. Next question. The city had $2.5 million of taxpayer money in Schoenberg Farm, and it just sold for $10. Why?
That's an excellent question. So part of the efforts with Schoenberg is that we get an appraisal. It's part of Westminster's property, and we get an appraisal. And with the amount of upgrades that it will take to bring this property up to par to even be usable, to be operational, or commercialized in any way, it was a wash. The appraisal cost was $0, which means that we were able to work out a property deal with the company that is now going to revitalize Schoenberg and make sure that it is something that we can all use in for years to come.
That is all accurate. What I would add to that is, if you know of the Schoenberg Farm property, that's historic property. So there's many historic buildings on that property. And so part of the reason that it's costly to upgrade or to take care of that property is because there's historic dollars that have went in to take care of those buildings. So it's not as if we would just want to scrape that property and sell it, which in a lot of ways would probably make it to the open market more valuable, because they wouldn't have those ties to whether it's state or local historic funds that have been allocated to those buildings. There's a lot of rules that go in place when you take government dollars in order to take care of historic buildings. So finding a partner who is willing to adhere to those rules and take care of that property and put the money into it is actually a value in my mind. And the developer's plans is to also make sure that they're being true to the Jewish community, which Schoenberg Farm was, a Jewish family that did a lot of great things for Colorado. So I would ask folks to think about that too. It's not just a simple, we sold it for $10. There's a lot that goes into that. And I'd be happy to discuss that outside of this meeting with anybody who would want to hear more.
And in the contract, it states we have right to first refusal if it doesn't work out. Next thing is, what is being done to reduce the amount of expired license plates, particularly temporary ones?
I would say the proper jurisdiction on that would be your motor vehicle department. That would not be city related, although we do have our code enforcement and our police officers that are ticketing and making sure that we are adhering to our codes and laws. So that would be outside.
Yeah, if you see if the license plates is on your block that's temporary and expired May of 2022, call the non-emergency number of police department, tell them all the information, someone will be by and write them a ticket.
And the non-emergency number is 303-658-4300. Is it 4360?
I think it's 4360, isn't it?
I don't know, I wrote it down wrong. Hold on.
4360, correct?
4360, I stand corrected.
We don't have any other questions. We got a list of questions that were on the website, and we have, the first question was, what will the city do to enforce firework laws? The past summer in my neighborhood had 48 nights straight of illegal and loud fireworks. That's not quality of life. That's true, and the avalanche winning in June didn't help us out. I honestly thought, as much as my neighborhood lit up, that maybe there wouldn't be any more fireworks for the 4th of July. I was wrong. Anyway, here's the issues with that. It's not that the police aren't about, but when they do see it happening and they haven't seen the actual person lighting it, they can't get anybody in the crowd to say who they saw lighting it. Therefore, we don't know who to write a ticket to, and we don't have anybody to take to court. So a lot of it is neighbors don't like telling on neighbors, but you have to, the key is a police officer has to see that thing being lighted and who it's been lighted by in order to issue a ticket. Anything other than that, they can't do anything with. Yes, ma'am. Just a second, let a microphone get to you.
I have called the police department because I thought I was hearing gunshots and been told, oh yeah, they're shooting fireworks over there at that house. Looks to me like somebody could drive by and at least have a talk with the house. I mean, you see the debris in the street the next morning. If it's going off at night, somebody could at least stop in and say, this is not legal.
And all of that depends on caseload. If they have a burglary going on, if they have other priorities, fireworks will always be at the bottom of that priority list.
They obviously are.
The law states you can light fireworks the day before the 4th and the day after the 4th as well as the 4th. That's the law, just so everybody knows. Okay, another question. What is being done to stop the late night car racing on 112th Avenue? I report it often, and if you don't, shame on you, because wherever you do hear street racing, it's reportstreetracing.com, and that's the only way they know how many complaints they're getting, where they're getting them from, and at what time of night. I don't care if it's 2 in the morning. It's on my speed dial to fill it out, and I send it in. And I know they're catching people on US 36 because I tell everyone, if you hear it, don't just complain. No, but nothing can be done to just say, oh, I'm sick of it, or why is it going on? Report it.
The other thing that I would share that council has recently done is we use through ordinances some ability that we've given to the police and the courts in order to impound a car. And this is in egregious cases, but I'll give you the use case of why this is important. What happens is these speed racers, that they know that if they run and they drive fast enough, we're not going to chase them because it's dangerous. So it's more dangerous for our officers to chase you if you're going to go 110 miles per hour to get away from them, you know, down a street where there are other people. So they're not going to do that. The problem before we made this is that once they get that car, they don't know for sure who was driving that car. They may know that it was the car because they saw the car and have plates, but if they don't know that you were driving, how are they supposed to hold you accountable? So what we've done is we've given a tool that they can hold the owner of the car accountable. The owner then, there's a process that they have to go through that's pretty rigorous because you have to imagine taking somebody's property is a pretty big step, and we take that very seriously. But there's a whole thing that they have to go through to serve due process. And like, say if it's your kid who's driving, they might give you a rule and say your kid's not allowed to drive your car while this is going through that process. I've heard a lot of this with motorcycle drivers as well because they run. So this gives us the ability to know that car was used. We can track that car down later, find it at home, and say we're going to take your car till we sort it out, which is a good tool that the police department and the court said that they wanted, and we delivered that to them.
Hang on, we need a microphone to you.
I live by 95th and Osceola on the corner by the parking lot for Highland Hills. It's terrible. We have called the kids racing out of there, almost ending up in our yards, heading up 96, and we're asked, can you identify the driver? Well, no, it's night and it's dark. Well, do you have the plate? No, but I can tell you what color the car is. Well, we can't do anything unless you can identify the driver. So don't give us that, what you just said, because that does not happen.
Well, ma'am, I understand what you're saying, but you have to, if I say that yellow car out there, how many cars are yellow? And I don't mean to be argumentative, but they have to have some ability to know that car. So in the instance that I am citing, they would know what car it is. They would see a license plate, have it, on maybe their body cam or something. But there is ability. This is a tool that the police department asked for, ma'am. I understand that you're
is so dark.
Well, I understand.
And
So
when
in
they
this,
come out of there, there's no way we can identify a driver or even see the plate.
Understand, and I'm not saying that this is the
So
solution
why call?
I'm not saying this is the solution for everything. This is a solution that we've given. It's a tool in the tool belt of our police officers. What I would ask is, since we have staff here, if staff would make sure that we find out the corner she's talking about, because one of the other things that we have done, and I had a resident recently report to me a stop sign that kept getting blown through where they crossed the street to go to the park and take their little kid. So I know that they reported that to me. I gave that to the city manager. The city manager gave that to the police department, and I can tell you that resident called me back in the next 2 days and said they have been out there. He was texting me. He's like, they just pulled over another one. Word gets out when they do that, and that is part of what I was talking about earlier when we are asking them to do extra enforcement on streets. But I will ask that the city manager make sure we find out where she's talking about, and we do the same kind of mitigation that we did for the last one I reported.
Appreciate it, because we have such a bad time there with that parking lot.
We need you to use a microphone.
That one kid last year was shot because we can't see. It's so dark. To see that somebody was shot, all we heard was the shots. We have asked the city. I've called the police chief and everything. We've talked to detectives. We would like to have a little bit more patrol once in a while, once it gets dark. It has signs, they're not allowed to be in there after dark. We have called, and I have literally watched the police car drive down the street, not even go into the parking lot where they're parked and not supposed to be there, and just drive down and leave. And leave. What good does it do for us as residents to call when we're told to call and they don't do anything?
I'm going to ask the city manager to make sure we get an update, because I know we've seen notes on this specific area. So I'd like to understand better. And I would expect that they actually do stop. I would ask you to think about what the mayor said, though, because sometimes, say that cop is coming and it looks like they did nothing, they could have got a call for a robbery. There's a lot of reasons maybe they drove off. Maybe they didn't do their job that night. That's
There during the day in the parking
well,
lot.
we are going to follow up on that specific one, and I would ask if any of the rest of you have a specific concern like that. That is what we're here for. And I can tell you that there is not a member of council that I haven't heard got a complaint where there's an area for us to do improvement, that we haven't taken it to the city manager as your representatives, and I will tell you that they've been responsive to us. So I would ask you to, if you're not getting the results that you want, that's what we're here for. You talk to us and we will ask why you're not getting the results, and they'll explain to us. Maybe at the end of the day, we don't, see eye to eye on what the results should be, but we will give it a shot.
No, I understand that.
Like is we need to look at street lighting.
And that, I think, is something we can do with Highland Hills, because this is Carol Butts Park, and it's a joint effort, and there is inadequate lighting there, so adding more lighting is going to help.
And I was just in a meeting last week with Parks and Rec, and Highland Hills was there with all that they're going to be changing in that area, and they had not thought about going to our police department to say, how does this look out? Because me as a citizen, I have a bunch of trees, and especially evergreen trees behind my house that kids hide behind and drink. When people think they're at the AMC theater, they go out the side door after mom and dad leave and they go party. And we've had other things happening. So I said to them, first thing, well, if you're going to plant evergreen trees, cut the first branches so police can see through them, and it encourages no one to plant there. Oh, they hadn't thought about that. And then there were some other things, and I said, where you're causing an extra barrier for the police, just take this format and take it to the police department. They will go through it and tell you what will not work for them. And they said that they would, and I hope they do, because if they plant everything and put this in place and it inhibits our officers from doing what they need to be doing, it's going to get worse. So they said they hadn't thought about going to the police department. I said, always go to the police department when it comes to safety and with what you're dealing with, because I told them that's one of our number one places we get complaints about. And so we had a good conversation about that. Thanks for your concern. Any other questions? Let me get a microphone to you.
I have a question in regards to the conversation here about the police, and I'm going to defer and ask this officer just for a minute. How many beats are there in the city? 7 beats in the city, throughout the city. Recently, I was entered into a conversation with the PD, and I was told at night we only have 8 officers, uniformed officers, on patrol, and 3 traffic officers. Now that's to cover 7 beats. So that might explain why you're not seeing the police come. And as they said, they take things in priority. And unfortunately, some of these traffic calls, they rate right where she said with fireworks, 1 notch above. It's not a blood and guts crime. But the root problem is we do not have enough officers on the street in each beat. Thank you.
Anybody want to take another one from our list? Some of them are very long. There's one on e-bikes that go and read it when it gets posted, because I did not know there's 3 classes of e-bikes. The first 2 can be on sidewalks. A class 3 cannot be on sidewalks. And it's tough for any of us to know which one is which. So it goes through what the police department's doing, what the code enforcement is on e-bikes versus sidewalks versus our lanes for bicycles. Anybody else want one?
There's a couple questions on here about the Airbnbs and the short-term rentals. And so, when they post this, I would ask you the same thing to go read. But we did make a change so that there is rules around the Airbnbs in Westminster. An owner can only have so many. They have to register with the city in order to do that. And the reason that's important is because to date, without that, you may know it's an Airbnb, but we don't require them to register with the city. So we may not know who the owner is when they have people come in and maybe they have a loud party, which is what is pointed out here. But with us having a tool in an ordinance, if somebody's running an Airbnb that's not registered, then we have some legal action that we can take against that property owner. Or if they do have it registered and they're not, policing the people who stay there like a hotel would, then we can go to that owner and we have some action that we can take in order to mitigate the problem for the neighborhood wherever the Airbnb is. And some of the other things around the rule, and I don't remember all the different facets of it right off the top of my head, but it limits people, I think, to having only one Airbnb per individual in the city. So it limits people from buying up a whole bunch of property and making Airbnbs all across the city. So we kind of looked around what our neighboring communities were doing and tried to do something that fit better for us. And with most things, council usually asks staff like, okay, we'll put this in place. We want to report back in 6 months and a year so we can see how's it going. Do we need to make any tweaks to the rules? Do we go too far, not far enough? And so those are things that we'll look at, down the road to see if we hit the mark with that or if we need to make adjustment.
They're working on so the question is there's no enforcement on it, there's no way to report it. Continuing to report through our police department is one avenue for the time being. It doesn't go into effect until January 1st of next year. They are working on software to create a reporting structure.
And in addition to what she just said, so the ordinance, again, is very, very new. It was passed on May 22nd, 2023, so it's just a couple months ago. And so if you want to have more information or report anything, you can also call 303-658-2342, or you can email str@westminsterco.gov, which is our new domain name if you didn't hear that, in order to ask questions about it.
Please raise your hand if you have a question. Just don't blurt out. Anybody else? Does anybody want to talk about pickleballs? There is a question.
Someone in Countryside asked about pickleballs and whether we're doing resurfacing of them, and we have 6 going in the municipal court right next to it, and they are slated to open next month.
And there's going to be more pickleballs down at the MAC soon. Yes, ma'am. Wait till a microphone gets to you. Who's got a microphone?
What is happening with the airport and the increased air traffic? I mean, some of those airplanes come down so darn low. I mean, it rattles my windows.
Mayor Pro Tem is our representative.
So I recently was made the representative for council to the Rocky Mountain Airport Roundtable. So the noise roundtable is the FAA's method for for municipalities that are touched by an airport like Rocky Mountain Airport, in order to talk about noise issues. So ultimately, that's under the control of the FAA. Once a plane goes off the ground, they're the ones in control. The property is actually in Jefferson County, so none of that is in Westminster, but obviously they fly over Westminster, and we have other municipalities such as Lafayette, Superior, the city and county of Boulder, Arvada, and Jefferson County. We all have representation in Erie, I think, have representation on that roundtable. And so it's difficult because we don't really have a say over it. Just like the airport actually doesn't have as much say over it as you would think. The FAA has a lot of control over what goes on at the airport. But they do take recommendations, and so one of the things that the FAA requires, if we're gonna make like recommendations of like, say, ways that people can fly, in order to mitigate some of the sound, that whole roundtable, or the majority of the roundtable, has to say, yeah, we want that to go in place. So the representative, the trustee from Superior, just our last meeting, we meet the first Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock at the airport, and they do broadcast those live, so you can go to Rocky Mountain Airport's website and listen to those meetings. But at this last one, the trustee from Superior had met with the FAA, the flight schools that fly out of there, and the airport to talk about some different ways that he thought that we could immediately mitigate some of the noise. And so one of the things that they're going to start recommending to the pilots, and again, this is not mandatory, but typically they get pretty good participation from what they said, especially since they had buy-in from the people who fly out of there, was at 10 o'clock at night for them to take a different flight path that's closer to the airport and to not use one of the runways unless it was a safety issue, which is one that flies over more of the houses in the different municipalities. So it's just one example of some of the work that we're doing there. The other thing is we've hired a consultant who is looking at noise sensitive areas, which is more and more difficult because there's houses pretty much all around the airport anymore. I live probably about 3/4 of a mile from the airport, so I understand, the concern. But those consultants are helping us with the same group of people, the FAA and the flight school, and there's a member of the FAA who attends those meetings to look at different ways that we could recommend different maneuvers in order to mitigate some of the noise for the community. So it's a big, long process. It's very frustrating because we don't really have control, but ultimately we are getting some stuff done.
We have a Boy Scout in the crowd. Do you have a question for us? You're trying to earn a badge. No questions? If you think of one, just raise your hand.
I'm wondering about the median on 120th Street between Huron and Lowell Boulevard. I've been told in the past that that's a state highway, and so we can't do anything about it. However, the same state highway goes through Broomfield, and their medians are all improved. You quickly know you're moved into Westminster because now our medians are ditches, dirt, weeds. And I'd like to see us have a little bit better look for Westminster. We got at the Huron point on 120th, we've got big signs that say entering Westminster. And it's kind of like nice signs, but it's kind of like it doesn't look very nice. What's the status on possibly doing something there?
I thought of you tonight as I had an event prior to this one, and I saw those medians and they're hideous. And I don't know if Broomfield pays for doing theirs. I don't know what that is, and I don't know that have we asked I know we've been told those are CDOTs, but can we do something with them, even put pretty rocks in them? I don't know. So we'll write it on our list and we'll put it on the website for an answer for you after 2 meetings. But I did think of you tonight. I thought, oh, is he going to be there tonight? Because these do look horrible. They do.
You're a much quieter group than the last time.
You had to have come with a question.
That's a compliment to you. You follow up.
He just, wait a second, we don't have a microphone to you. What he said was he appreciates that when a question's asked, we do get back to people and we put it on the website.
I was just giving them a compliment that it shows that they follow up. And that's one of our biggest complaints when I was in education, that there was no follow-up. Parents got very angry. But one of the things else is that, can you put a little bit of it in that newsletter where you had tonight's meeting at the bottom? Maybe somehow include some of the important questions in there. That way you wouldn't have to have another piece of paper.
The person that writes that is here, and I'm sure he took note.
He gave you a thumbs up, so you ask, he delivers.
If you don't.
Can I?
Sure.
So and this kind of gets to why it's important for you guys to reach out. Specifically, if you're mad about something and you want to understand and you're frustrated. I had a resident who was very, very angry at me specifically, and he wanted to know why he had perceived that I didn't do certain things. And so I said, when do you have time for me to have a phone call with you? And so through the conversation, maybe he still didn't hear every single thing that he wanted to hear, but he at least got some better ideas around some of the stuff we've done over the last 12 months. And I don't expect you folks all to live and breathe this like we do. That's why you send us when we ask to do these jobs to do them. But I could tell you by the time we were done, maybe he still had some things actually that we sent to the city manager. And I recently saw the city manager follow up with him. That made him at least understand where we were, and he felt a lot better, I think, at the end of the conversation. And one of the things I thought about him while you were talking, because one of the questions on the sheet was what needs to happen in order to safely open Stanley Lake back with trailered boats. This says how the IGA that we currently have with our partners who have water in that lake goes through 2030. And some of the things that he didn't realize was kind of that we actually have reached out to them. There was a desire by the majority of council to say, please talk to us about this again, because the majority of us don't think that all the solutions were properly vetted. There were residents who did a lot of hard work that we don't think they necessarily looked all the way through the solutions that were talked about. But at the end of the day, we do have an IGA with those partners that was put in by 4 members of the previous council, and 3 of us that were still here all voted no, but ultimately that is now the agreement that we have to live by. And I do think it's important for us to uphold agreements that we go into with our neighbors. So we will continue to have conversations, at least I will, wherever I get an opportunity. I saw some of them at an event last week, and I bring it up, and I'll continue to bring it up whenever I see them, because I sure would like them to have a conversation with us, because I grew up next to that lake, and that was something that was just part of living in that part of Westminster, was having the boats. So hopefully someday we can come to an agreement that allows that to happen again.
Awesome.
I haven't seen any information on the election and the candidates for council. Are you going to be running a debate or providing any information on the candidates?
They will have, they've all received questions, and I think they're due Friday. And then those will be broadcast. And are they being mailed out?
They're being mailed out to all residents, and it was emailed today. It's on the website. There's videos.
Yeah,
You
there's
should use a
videos.
mic.
There's videos, and it will be mailed out. Everything will be on the website, but things will be coming to your home. And also you can go to YouTube and see their individual videos.
So and as far as forums, and I think the city will list on their website, but I know that there's a forum, I think, last weekend of the month at the Grange in the morning, that's hosted by, those are usually hosted by third parties. The city doesn't, they partner with them and help try to, make sure that they're set up. But the Heart of Westminster will do one, and I think it's the League of Women Voters that puts that on. And then the Chamber, the Westminster Chamber will also do one. I'm not sure when theirs is, but I know that the Heart of Westminster's at the Grange is the last Saturday of the month.
And it's at 9 o'clock, Saturday, September 30th.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Keith Alwaniel. I'm director here at Crown Pointe. I just wanted to first say thank you for coming out and visiting the school tonight. I really appreciate it. The compliment I want to put out there is for the Westminster PD and Officer Wozni, who probably is going to go, aw shucks, but we just recently had a lockdown drill, which in this day and age is super important. We had 8 officers here, the most professional, well-organized, thorough, and thoughtful drill we've ever done, with the least impact on our student body in 20 years of doing similar drills. And so I just want to compliment the force for doing such an amazing job, and also with a very gentle touch. We're at K-8, so we got 5-year-olds here, and to make sure that they felt safe and comfortable. So I want to congratulate and thank Officer Wozni and his team for doing such an amazing job, and also just in general being such a great partner and being available whenever we've needed them for any reason. It really instills a lot of confidence and safety that I have for our student body, and having a partner with the Westminster Police Force. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who was involved, and let you guys know what these guys do and how much they really do care about the safety and well-being of all citizens of Westminster, but especially students in our schools. So thanks to those guys. Appreciate it.
And thank you for allowing us to be here tonight and hold this forum. Thanks. Thank you.
Not everybody at once.
It's right behind you.
Have a question for the greater Shaw Heights community. There's a lot of chatter in our community right now, people wanting to know information on the Shaw Boulevard diagonal being non-accessible to our residents. When and how will they be notified way in advance of the closure so they can make other arrangements to get in and out of the neighborhood? Not just the Westminster side, but the Adams County portion over there of Shaw Heights too, because they'll be affected by that.
With the developer this morning, and they're going to send out postcards to all the surrounding neighborhoods. They're also going to update their website, and we will share that information through the city's website as well. Yes, and along with barricades.
What he's asking.
I say you need to have signs up before you put barricades up. People need to make other arrangements. You know, not everybody goes to the website. Not everybody gets or reads their mail. There needs to be physical signs out there saying, on this date, this street will be closed, well in advance of the actual closure date.
The developer shared the signs with us. We know that they're going to post it.
Thank you. Does he have a question?
So we are just all going to sit here and stare at each other then.
I hate keeping you. If everybody's satisfied and doesn't have any questions, I promise this young man, if he has any questions for us, that we will stay, and he's trying to get his community badge. So we'll stick around since it's early. But if you have no more questions, we thank you so much for coming out. All of our emails and phone numbers are listed everywhere. Never hesitate to contact us. In just 1 second, we have somebody. Give him your phone or your...
We got a question online.
Okay.
What are the pros and cons of a ward system for the city?
Pros and cons of a ward system. Yep.
I could stand up here and tell you what I think are the pros and cons of a ward system, and I certainly think there are some, and I have heard different views from the 7 members of council, be it some don't like ward systems, some do, some like some different version of ward systems. What I do think is great is that we've put it on the ballot, just a simple question: do you think that the city should evaluate wards? And if that does happen, then there will be something put together that definitely is citizen driven in order to decide what wards would actually look like for the city. Because I certainly think that if we're going to make that kind of drastic of a change, and I think council majority agreed on that, because that's why we went with this question, is that we'd like the residents' fingerprints on that. But the first question is, before we do that work and have residents come and put their time and effort into it, let's see if the majority of the city wants a ward system.
And the reason that you can't just say yes or no and then it's done is because there are several changes affected in our charter, and each one has a different place. It will be a different question that you all will need to vote on. So it is much more complicated than, do you want wards or don't you? If you say yes, a team has to be put together, a task force of citizens, to decide how that's going to look. It can have many different ways of looking. And believe it or not, there's some cities that, because we're always told everybody around us has wards. I hear from those mayors, and they're sick and tired of sometimes having no one running, and then they get elected, have their election. The first thing they have to do is put a thing together to interview for that ward that nobody ran for, but appoint because nobody ran. And they look at us and say, we wish we had yours. So you can look at it so many different ways. Just do your homework and think about you might like and how you would like it. And we have a question over here.
I have 3 questions.
Ask them one at a time.
I am. Yeah, well. What is the city doing to help the homelessness?
Anybody want to answer? What are we doing?
Will, but I talk a lot.
Go for it.
So around homeless, this is a topic that I can tell you is I get equally yelled at from people who think we do too much and people who think we don't do enough, either for the homeless or to take care of the homeless or get rid of the homeless. A lot of different views on it. I will tell you the approach that we've taken is called the continuum of care, and it is something that's mixed between what property rights have between a property owner. So like if you're a property owner and you have a problem with homeless on your property, if it's your property, you call the police and you say, I want them gone, they'll be gone that day. If it's on public property, that's a little bit more difficult because that's public property. Those folks are citizens, that's their property too, and they have a right to be. So there is some rules around how we have to address that. And so the first thing we try to do is connect them to resources. And so this council over the last year has put money behind what we call homeless navigators. Those homeless navigators they know all the things about the different services and human services in our counties and all your different nonprofit partners, and they will try to connect those individuals who are unhoused to services. And then they go through a whole, weeks, it's a couple weeks process. If those individuals still won't take, because sometimes they won't, they just are happy doing what they're doing. Once they go through that process, we do have steps where we can remove them. Or if it's like a safety concern and we've seen the camps, those become a safety issue, not just for the individuals living in them, but the people surrounding to them. So it's a balance where we have to look at the rights of the residents who have homes, the residents who don't have homes, and make sure that we're following the law, but keeping everybody as safe as possible. So it's obviously a lot more difficult, and the people that do that work, we thank them every day because that's hard work, and it's, in a lot of ways unforgiving work or unthankful work, but that is what we're doing in that. And I bet we do actually have time for your other 2 questions.
You're going to get an insight onto what happens on city council because we actually have diversity and we have different opinions, okay? There's nothing wrong with homeless. There's everything wrong with trespassers. And we have misdefined the problem we have as homeless. And the problem we have is trespassers. And you can really trespass on public property just the same as you can trespass on private property. It's just that we're not being vigorous about it. We have almost set up another set of laws that citizens of the community don't have to follow, which I think is ridiculous. Can you really trespass on the White House grounds? Of course you can't. And yet we're using a ruling from a different federal district that doesn't apply to us and is being challenged in the court system from Grants Pass, Oregon, and going up the thing. We don't have to follow that rule. This council has chosen to follow the rule. The council has gone from spending $400,000 a year on really trespassers to $1 million a year on trespassers. And when I asked the question the other night at council meeting, we can't really tell if it's made any difference at all. I think we need to be much more vigorous about the problem. It's not homelessness, it's trespassers who are intimidating our citizens.
So there's a lot of big words that were used with both Councilor Baker and Mayor Pro Tem. So in some simple terms is that we have rules that we need to follow at a federal level, which means Congress or presidential level. And that means that if they come up with a ruling, that it trickles down all the way at a state level, and it could potentially even come down to a city level. And so what Councilor Baker was saying is that we are following a ruling at a very high level, and that if someone comes to your property, that you have private property, which means like your home, or if mom and dad own a business, that's private property. And if you are in a public property setting, which is like a school or a park, that's okay in a homeless setting that they rest there in a public space. But when they come onto a private space, there's a lot more regulation, a lot more that needs to happen or can happen because they're on a private setting. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
And I'm gonna go a little more adult with some of this answer because I would like to address some of what I heard here. And I find it interesting because when Councilor Baker was first on council, there was a homeless individual named Eric Brandt that he stuck up for that individual's rights, rightfully so, multiple times. So I find it interesting that now all of a sudden we should just kick them all out because it's just not that easy in my opinion. So in order for you to tell me that it's just people trespassing, I'd ask you to go, like the mayor and I did, and visit some of the homeless folks. I met somebody who had recently got out of jail, and he was, by all accounts, said, it's my fault, I did this, I went to jail, and we asked, why don't you go to a shelter? And he said, I just spent 10 years in small quarters. That was his story. I'm not saying it's wrong, right, or indifferent. He talked about some of the people who were nearby. We met another person who the individual who toured the camps with us introduced us to, and I don't know if you've ever heard the term rearranging chairs from the Titanic. During the Titanic, people, just to keep themselves busy, this individual was moving trash from one part of the camp to another part of the camp and moving this trash from that part of the camp to that part of the camp. He was meticulous in what he was doing, but you can't tell me that there isn't some mental health there. So it's just like when we say that our whole problem is in Colorado is affordable housing and that's why we have a homeless issue. That's just not reality. The homeless issue is a multi-facet issue from drug abuse to cost of living to mental health problems, and I wish that we had a magic wand to crack it, but I certainly would say that the majority of council has decided that we're going to do it with some humanity while we follow the law and try to make sure that we find a good solution for it. So the majority of council, that's where we're at. If a different majority wants to do something else, that's what I guess they could do. But I do think it's important to understand why we did this. It's not because we don't care about the issue. We don't care about people's safety. We're trying to address all the different things in a way that we're not just kicking them from this street to that street to the next street to Arvada back here. That's not a solution.
And City Manager, I believe, and maybe if this can get on the web, I'm looking for Andy, if this can get on the website, I think we do have some success stories of how many people we've reached last year, how many have been taken out of the system, and if the person says they know they need help, either with mental illness, with drug addiction, whatever their issues are, and when we say, would you like us to help connect you to services, and they say yes, we do everything possible to get them connected, get them off the street, get them into permanent housing so that they can start a new life. And I do believe we've been very successful with that. And if they say no, they want to stay just the way they are, then we have different things that we do because that's not okay. And then they can be trespassed. So I want you to just understand we are trying to meet them as an individual that either just came on hard times, was one paycheck away from that they lost their job, and now they're on the everybody has their own story, but we're just trying to connect them to get back into the citizen that they used to be, that they can go out and get a job again and be productive in our society, not just what they're doing at that moment. So we are trying to help. What's your second question?
I actually only have one more question.
Okay. Microphone. Close.
I actually only have one more question.
Okay.
What can youth do to help?
Help the homeless?
Yes.
Well, you've heard us talk about this council has given permission to hire extra help, and that was the navigators who go out and do all the assessment, work with these people each day, get to know them, because you have to build trust in order for that person to even want to come with you to meet whoever they need to meet and get on with life. That trust has to be built. It isn't built overnight. So it takes some time. It takes several meetings. And so we have put money into that. And like I said, I think we've been pretty successful, and we'll share that on the website with how many have turned their lives around. Did you have anything?
Yeah.
Well, I was just talking about council. Go ahead.
So council also has a youth advisory group that the mayor is a liaison to. And that could involve anything from giving council advice to having fundraisers, maybe getting some food bank, working with our food banks or our churches in order to help in that regard. And so there's lots of ways that your Boy Scout troop could help. And we are always open to feedback and working with youth, you and youth. So that's definitely something that as you get older, definitely remember that we have that as part of the city to join if you ever want to be part of our youth advisory group.
And if I can add on to the question about what are the pros and cons of wards, because I heard a couple cons, but I didn't hear any pros. Okay, one of the largest advantages of having a ward system is that it geographically places council members within a geographic area. It's just a fact of life that people who have more affluence and more time can do more public work things. But that leads to having lots of people in a more affluent part of town be the ones participating in the government. And when you have a ward system, if you have it makes a more regular distribution. Number two, when you only have part of the city voting on a candidate, it's less expensive for that candidate to reach people. If you look at the races in the city of Westminster, you can make a direct correlation between how much money was spent on the campaign and where they placed in the voting. Just a fact of life. Number three, it requires every part of the city to participate in the government. One of the hardest parts, and the mayor even mentioned it when she talks to other cities that have wards and they can't get anyone to run, okay, it basically requires them to really find people who want to take on that burden, who want to take on that task. And again, I think this is very important when you're bringing the city together. I actually voted against the advisory question we have on the ballot in 7 weeks. And I voted against it because it doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us a thing. I thought it would have been much better to have a tangible plan and say, voters, do you like this plan? That would have been much better, because they could have said yes or no, because there's all kinds of ways you can do a ward system. We actually talked about, and actually of the Councilor Emmons was a very strong advocate of placing something on the ballot, something meaningful and tangible. And one of the systems had us divide the city into 3 wards. Another system had us divided into 5 wards. And because we have an off-year spacing, do it. And it would also be better because then the people in a ward could focus just on having one winning candidate, where now we have multiple winning candidates, and that gets really confusing and really hard to tell the people. And besides the lack of participation, I really can't think of any cons to a ward system.
And this is why it's great to follow the process and listen, because there's always going to be a diversity of thought. I'm not necessarily anti-ward. If it was done right, I think it could be very beneficial for some of the reasons that Councilor Baker mentioned. I don't think it's going to take money out of it. If it did take money out of it, I would have been on council in 13 and not Councilor Baker, because I definitely outraised you in 13. So you're not 100% accurate with that. But I've talked to some neighbors that are in wards, and they're spending as much as we are for an at-large seat in the city of Westminster, and in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars more, which I was surprised to hear, because I did think it would equalize some of the money. But it's an important question, and I certainly think that there's pros and cons of it, so I hope that you think through it when you vote on that, because it could, if it's done right, it could be very beneficial to balance out representation in the city.
I will also say that, as the mayor mentioned, that there are charter outlines that we need to make sure that we follow. What the charter is a legal document between the citizens and the city of Westminster. And we cannot change that without the citizen input. And so with that, we have to think about election laws, how we can't just divide lines. We're in two different counties, in Jefferson County and Adams County. And so we can't just divide lines in that regard, for one. And two, we have to make sure that wards have equal representation, which can be very challenging because of geographically how Westminster is set up. All the way from the north at 144th, or actually I think we go to 160, where are you at, 164th?
I think it goes up to like 148.
48. There you go. All the way down to 69th, all the way from Stanley Lake, Rocky Flats area, all the way to 25. And so that is, and we interweave in Northland, and we have Broomfield in the mix. And so there's a lot to have. While it would be good to have a one-stop shop question, we just didn't think it was feasible because it really does require resident input as far as making that change. So election laws to follow, how the wards are going to be divvied up, lots of other, how vacancies are going to happen. Right now, our vacancies are set. So if someone leaves the position, it outlines how vacancies are set. Well, that will have to change if it's a ward system. So there's a lot of intricacies, not just with our city charter, but with thinking of how we would make Westminster into a ward is a lot more challenging than just saying, should we have it or should we not?
We don't have to hold them hostage, do we?
No, I'm just ready to say, I see no more online questions. Oh, one more.
Has Westminster ever considered becoming a city and county?
My time on council in the last 4 years, I have not seen that. Again, if we did that, Broomfield did that in my last, 30 years or so. 20 years or so, 23 years. There's a lot of intricacies with that. I know with the county, I believe you have to have a jail, and we're at capacity for land. We're landlocked. And so that would take a lot of thought and efforts to make us into a county. So I appreciate your question, but my time on council the last 4 years or so, and being involved, that has not come up as a question or even an interest.
My first time on council, it came up, but when they looked into it with the two counties and everything involved, it was going to be pretty cost prohibitive, and no one moved it forward. I see no more comments. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you to our Boy Scout that was here tonight, and thank you to Crown Pointe for hosting us, to all the staff that's around, and to our videographers here that put this on YouTube and Facebook and wherever it's at. Thank you, and thanks, and be safe going home.